There's this central puzzle when it comes to post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. The traumatic event itself is over. It's done. It's in the past. But for the person who's going through it, the threat feels incredibly, overwhelmingly present, like it's happening right now. So how is that even possible? Let's break it down.
And that right there is the core question we really need to answer. The leading theories on PTSD say the entire disorder really hinges on this paradox. The actual danger is gone, but the feeling of danger, that visceral sense of threat, it just stays. So how does that happen?
This quote, I think it just nails it. You see, most people have trauma symptoms right after something terrible happens. That's a normal human reaction. But then, over time, they recover. PTSD is what happens when that natural recovery process gets jammed up. When you get stuck, you are, in a very real sense, neurologically and psychologically frozen in that moment of trauma.
Okay, so to understand why someone gets stuck, we first have to look at how the mind is processing everything. Think of it like the brain's software. This isn't about someone not being strong enough. It's about how their brain is trying and struggling to handle the information from the trauma. So the leading cognitive model tells us there are two main problems that keep that feeling of threat going. First, something called negative appraisals. These are basically distorted beliefs that can form after the trauma. Things like, I'm broken forever, or nowhere is safe. And second, and this one is absolutely crucial, there's a problem with the memory itself. The way the event gets stored in the brain is just fundamentally different from a normal memory.
So what does a disturbance of memory actually mean? Well, a traumatic memory isn't filed away neatly in your brain like, what you had for breakfast last Tuesday. It's fragmented. It's all jumbled up. It doesn't have the proper context. It's missing that crucial timestamp that says, hey, this happened in the past and it is over now. And because of that, it's super easy to trigger. A random sight, a sound, a smell can pull the person right back into the memory, making it feel like it's happening all over again.
All right, so we've talked about the cognitive software. Now let's look at the brain's hardware. What is physically happening on a biological level that lets this whole process get so stuck in the first place?
To really get this, we need to meet three key players in the brain. First, you've got the amygdala. That's your threat detector, your internal alarm system. Then there's the hippocampus, which is like the brain's librarian. It's in charge of storing and organizing memories. And finally, the prefrontal cortex, which is like the rational manager, responsible for calming things down. In a typical brain, these three work together pretty well.
But in PTSD, this whole system gets thrown completely out of whack. The changes can be pretty profound. The amygdala, that alarm system, becomes hyper-reactive. The hippocampus, the librarian, can actually shrink. And the prefrontal cortex, the manager, really struggles to send that "it's okay, we're safe" signal. The brain's entire threat management system basically gets rewired for constant danger.
So let's start with the amygdala. The best way to think of it is as a smoke detector. Now, in PTSD, that smoke detector becomes incredibly sensitive. It's not just going off for a real fire anymore. It's going off for burnt toast, for steam from the shower. Pretty much anything that even vaguely resembles a threat can trigger a full-blown 5-alarm fire response.
Next up, the hippocampus, our memory librarian. Its main job is to take that trauma memory, stamp it with a time and a place, and file it neatly away on the past events shelf. But in PTSD, the hippocampus is impaired. It's like the librarian is overwhelmed and just can't file the memory correctly. So it leaves it right on the main desk, where it's always accessible, always feeling current. This is the biological hardware failure behind that disturbance of memory we were just talking about. And that brings us to the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of your brain that's supposed to step in and say, hey, amygdala, easy there, calm down, it's just burnt toast, we're totally safe. But in PTSD, that communication line between the calm prefrontal cortex and the panicked amygdala is weakened. The brain's braking system is pretty much offline, leaving that overactive alarm to just keep on ringing. So far, we've mostly been talking about what can happen after a single major traumatic event. But what happens when the trauma isn't a single event? What if it's something that was prolonged, something that was repeated over months or even years, especially during childhood? Well, that brings us to a really crucial distinction: complex PTSD. This table here lays out the difference really clearly. Complex PTSD, or CPTSD, has all the core symptoms of PTSD we've already covered, but it adds this whole other cluster of symptoms called disturbances in self-organization, or DSO. And this distinction is so important because it recognizes the incredibly deep impact of ongoing trauma, especially the kind where escape feels impossible.
So, what in the world is DSO? Well, it goes way beyond just flashbacks and avoidance. We're talking about really pervasive, ongoing challenges that can shape a person's entire way of being. Things like intense difficulty managing emotions, a deep seated negative self view, like feeling worthless or fundamentally flawed, and just persistent struggles in forming safe and stable relationships. It can affect the very foundation of who a person is.
And this is just so important to understand. The symptoms of CPTSD, they are not character flaws, not at all. They are brilliant, hard-won survival adaptations. Think about it. In an environment where there's constant threat, learning to numb your emotions or become hyper-aware of danger or anticipate other people's needs, those were strategies to survive. The tragedy is that those adaptations, which were once absolutely essential for safety, cause immense difficulty long after the danger is gone. Okay, so after hearing all of that, you might be feeling like it sounds pretty bleak. But understanding these mechanisms isn't just an academic exercise. It actually shines a direct light on the path to healing. If the brain can be wired into a state of constant threat, it can be rewired back towards safety. Recovery is really about helping the brain finish a job it just couldn't do at the time of the trauma. So here's the really hopeful part. The solution maps directly onto the very problems we identified at the beginning of this. Effective therapy is all about doing two things. First, helping the brain properly process and finally file away that stuck trauma memory. And second, challenging and updating those negative beliefs that are keeping the sense of threat alive and well in the present. And the really good news is we have proven ways to do this. The gold standard is what's known as trauma-focused psychotherapy. This includes things like cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, which directly helps you tackle those negative beliefs we talked about. There's also exposure therapy, which safely helps the brain unlearn the intense fear connected to trauma triggers. And another really effective one is EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a specific technique that helps the brain reprocess and file away those stuck traumatic memories. And that really brings us to the core of it all. The journey of healing from PTSD isn't about erasing the past. That's just not possible. It's about changing your relationship to the past. It's about getting to a place where the memory can be remembered, but it no longer has the power to hijack your present. It's about finally, truly, putting the past back where it belongs.